Good day, students. Welcome to your second year in UERM. I'm Dr. Lisa Kalimag, and this lecture is about writing the introduction part of the research paper. So at the end of the session, the students shall be able to do the following: write an appropriate introduction for the research proposal, state the general objective of the research question based on the study's purpose and the main research problem, formulate the corresponding specific objectives, and identify the dependent and independent variables, as well as the potential confounders, if any, of the study. So the introduction is the first part of the research paper or original article in the IMRAD format. This is the format in which journals typically publish their articles. Notice that there's no review of related literature here. Instead, we have a short background in the introduction. And other related literature are discussed in the discussion part. But this is for the completed research, the final article. This time, you are just going to make your research proposal. So these are the basic parts of your research proposal. It also starts with the introduction, followed by the review of related literature, the research methodology, presentation and analysis of data, and timetable and budgetary requirements. This is what we'll be following this semester for your research proposal. So what is the purpose of the introduction? It's in the name, of course. So it's to introduce a specific topic and give background information so that the reader can kind of get on the same baseline level of knowledge as the author, and that so they can understand the rest of the paper. But importantly, it also sets the initial impression, which motivates the reader, hopefully, to finish the article. These are the parts of the introduction. We have the statement of the problem, objectives, hypothesis, theoretical or conceptual framework, significance, scope and limitations, and definition of terms. Note that there is usually a background of the study at the start of the introduction, but since you are going to write a separate section for the review of related literature, that's why there's no background here. For theoretical or conceptual frameworks, these are often used in thesis and dissertations and in qualitative research, but may be omitted in epidemiologic research. Okay, so since you're not going to be having conducting qualitative research in your research proposal this semester, so you are not required to have a conceptual framework or a theoretical. So for the statement of the problem, Dr. Wanko already discussed this with the statement of the problem lecture. So just a review, in presenting a research question, you have to present the PCOM, which includes the population, the intervention or exposure, the comparison or control, the outcome, and the methodology. So for the objectives are what the researcher hopes to achieve or the outcomes he or she is hoping to be produced in a study. It's the solution to the research problem. The objectives are really crucial for a study. They're like the crux of the study. They indicate the relevant variables, they guide the researcher in the choice of research design or methods, they tell you what data to collect and are useful in planning the analysis of results, and are the basis for interpreting results. So are you familiar with SMART? So in the same way that your research problem should be SMART, the way that you state your objectives should also be SMART. So specific means you give a focus on what the study is trying to solve by identifying the dependent and independent variables and possibly instruments to measure the variables. For measurable, you use action words which are specific enough to be measured. Use operational terms specifying exactly what the researcher wishes to do. For achievable, it should be realistic with the resources and time that you have. For relevant, what will be the impact of the study results? But note that this is implicit. You should not write the significance of the study in your objective. You should write it just in the significance part. Okay, then for time bound, you state the time frame or endpoint. So you can state, for example, the study period like school year 2026 to 2027, or specific months of implementation like April to August 2027. For general objective, this states what is expected to be achieved or the outcomes of the research in overall terms. So it's the solution to the research problem. It's derived from the research problem and the hypothesis. Um, so for objectives, we have one general objective followed by a few specific objectives. Okay, so don't worry about sounding repetitive. It's okay if the general objective is just the declarative form of the research question. Then for specific objectives, this systematically addresses various parts of the research problem. It specifies all that you need to do to answer the general objective and is expressed in measurable terms such as indicators. So you break down a general objective into smaller, logically connected parts. For example, if your general objective is to determine if Sambong can decrease serum cholesterol in middle-aged Filipinos versus simvastatin, so a correct specific objective would be to determine LDL levels of middle-aged Filipinos after giving Sambong versus simvastatin for 6 weeks. An incorrect specific objective will be if the topic suddenly shifts, for example, to determine the blood pressure of middle-aged Filipinos after giving Sambong for 6 weeks. Your objectives must show the desired outcomes, the populations under study, the independent variables, such as the groups being compared or levels of intervention used, and the conditions under study. So basically, try to incorporate your PCOM into your objectives. For example, our general objective is, again, to determine if Sambong is more effective in decreasing serum cholesterol in middle-aged Filipinos versus simvastatin. Our specific objective 1 would be to determine the baseline LDL levels of middle-aged Filipinos. Specific objective 2 would be to determine the LDL levels of middle-aged Filipinos after being given Sambong versus simvastatin for 6 weeks. And specific objective 3 would be to determine if there is a statistically significant difference in the LDL levels between middle-aged Filipinos given Sambong versus simvastatin for 6 weeks. Okay. So these are the two types of research design. You have qualitative or quantitative. So we're reviewing this because when stating your objectives, you use action words depending on whether your research is qualitative or quantitative. So as a review, qualitative studies answer the why question. They observe and interpret, and they group common data without using statistical analysis. You're actually not allowed to do qualitative studies in this course, so we'll stick to quantitative studies, which answer how many or how much questions. The data gathered are numerical, and you do statistical analysis. So even on topics, for example, on quality of life or opinions regarding, for example, vaccines in the community, you think it might be a quantitative study. You think it might be a qualitative study. But if you use a questionnaire which generates numbers, averages, frequencies, etc., then it is still a quantitative study. So for quantitative studies, you use these words in your objectives: to determine, to compare, to calculate, to test, or to evaluate. In contrast, when doing qualitative studies, in your objectives, you use words like to describe, to explore, to understand, to discover, to develop, and to generate. This is another example of a general objective and specific objectives in a cross-sectional study, specifically a prevalence study. So the population is children in Metro Manila. The exposure is leptospirosis, and the outcome is the magnitude of leptospirosis and its risk factors. So how do you make this into objectives? So this is an example. The general objective may be to determine the magnitude of leptospirosis and its risk factors among children in Metro Manila, while the specific objectives are to determine first the prevalence of leptospirosis among children in Metro Manila, and second, to determine the prevalence of selected risk factors among children in Metro Manila. Let's move on to defining the variables in your study. These are the types of variables. Okay, so we have the independent variable, which is the one you manipulate, the dependent or response or outcome variable. Confounding variables distort the results of the study, and background variables. An example would be the demographic characteristics of the study subjects. So one by one again, independent variables are variables that cause the change in the dependent variable. Input or stimulus cause the variation in the event of interest. What is being manipulated by the researcher, and there may be more than one independent variable. In contrast, dependent variables are the outcome or effect of the independent variable. For confounding variables, these are extraneous variables not included in the research or not held constant, but would have a probable impact on the outcome of the research, and any variable other than the independent variable that could cause a change in the dependent variable. For background variables, these are often called demographic or baseline characteristics, such as age, sex, or employment status, etc. These are traits that describe the study population but are not the primary focus of the research question. For research hypothesis, this is a conjectural statement of the relationship between two or more variables. So it is the researcher's prediction of the research findings. It can be tested empirically and is the primary purpose of the hypothesis. Excuse me. So the primary purpose of the hypothesis is to establish the basis for tests of statistical significance. So again, the hypothesis is a prediction of a relationship between one or more factors and the problem under study which can be tested. So the null hypothesis, there is no real difference between the means or proportions of the groups being compared, or that there is no real association between the dependent and independent variables. For alternative hypothesis, you state that there is a real difference or that there is an association between groups. So for alternative hypothesis, it can either be unidirectional or bidirectional. So again, for null hypothesis, there is no relationship or difference between variables or groups. For example, the grades of medical students who attend online lectures this semester are no different from those who attend face-to-face lectures. For unidirectional hypothesis, it states the direction of the relationship or difference between variables or groups. For example, medical students who attend face-to-face lectures this semester have higher grades than those who attend online lectures. For bidirectional hypothesis, it states only that there is a difference between variables or groups, but does not say which is greater or smaller. Or it states that there is an association between variables, but does not say in which direction. For example, there is a significant difference between the grades of students who attend face-to-face lectures and those who attend online lectures. So try to test yourself. Is this alternative hypothesis unidirectional or bidirectional? There is an association between AI use and student grades at the end of the semester. Is it unidirectional or bidirectional? So this is bidirectional. Next, students who used AI were more likely to have higher or lower grades at the end of the semester, depending on your chosen hypothesis. So this is unidirectional. Okay, so moving on to guidelines in writing hypothesis. In experimental studies, hypotheses are explicit. In descriptive or historical studies, hypotheses may not necessarily be explicitly stated. Of course, it is formulated from the research question. So guidelines in writing hypothesis: avoid value judgment, avoid words which imply judgment like better than or ought to be or should be or poor. Excuse me. Such as medication A is superior to placebo in reducing dizziness, or non-cognitive evaluation is inferior to cognitive evaluation in predicting board exam performance of medical students, or online classes are better than face-to-face classes for teaching skills to working professionals. So instead of saying superior, you can specify it, for example, to subjects given medication A have less incidence of dizziness compared to placebo. Instead of saying inferior, you can say Non-cognitive evaluation has less positive predictive value in predicting board exam performance as compared to cognitive evaluation. And instead of saying online classes are better, you can make it measurable by saying there are higher skill scores among those taking online classes compared to face-to-face class. Excuse me. Moving on to theoretical or conceptual framework. So a theory is a well-substantiated explanation of phenomena, an observable fact or event. A theoretical framework is an explanation of the theories and assumptions used in a research and provides context. This is based on a review of related literature, sometimes used interchangeably with a conceptual framework. And this is an example of a theoretical framework showing the theories and assumptions of the study on what impacts the behavior of health professionals. So you can see that beliefs about capabilities, intention, and habit or past behavior affect the present behavior of health professionals. And these five things affect the intention. So the theoretical framework should be based on literature, not just on whatever the author is hypothesizing. This is another example of a theoretical framework showing health systems. It shows the relationship of each concept or part with other parts. It shows the cause and effect relationships through the arrows. Conceptual framework is a bit different from a theoretical framework. So whether you, okay, wait lang. So a conceptual framework is a diagram showing the relationship between the variables being studied and the factors affecting them, including but not limited to exposure, outcome, and confounding variables. It shows the cause and effect relationships. Okay. So whether you are writing a theoretical or conceptual framework, it should have a short explanation, not just the diagram itself. And cite your references, especially if you have based your framework on another author. So this is a bit of a complicated example of a conceptual framework. First, you put your independent variable affecting your dependent variable. Add in any confounding variables, and if applicable, you can add moderating variables, mediating variables, and control variables. For example, your independent variable is social media usage, and you suppose that it affects academic performance, your dependent variable. You have confounding variables such as socioeconomic status, prior academic achievement, and there is a mediating variable which is study habits, meaning social media usage directly affects study habits before it affects academic performance. Self-discipline here is labeled as a moderating variable, but for simplicity, you can just label it as a confounding variable also. So in your research proposal, you really just need to include at least the independent variable and the dependent variable and the confounding variable. So again, you are not required to have a conceptual framework, and definitely you do not need to do a theoretical framework since you are not conducting qualitative studies. And discuss with your research advisor if they will require you to include a conceptual framework in your proposal. Next, for significance of the research. So who has an interest in the domain of inquiry? What do we already know about the topic? What has not been answered adequately in previous research and practice? And how will this research add to knowledge, practice, and policy in this area? Can it be used to inform future health programs? Next, for scope and limitations. So you review your research problem and objectives, the scope or coverage of your study. What are the possible biases and confounders? And how will you minimize these? What are the possible consequences of these biases and confounders? What variables or factors are not covered by your research? Next, moving on to definition of terms. So for the definition of terms, nominal or conceptual definition are definitions found in dictionaries. use these nominal definitions for some terms that readers may not understand or are not familiar with. Next is operational definition, or how a word is used in research. You have a measured operational definition, which describes how a variable is to be measured, such as a score from a questionnaire developed to measure hunger, or experimental operational definition, which is how an investigation manipulates a variable, such as preventing the subject from consuming anything for X number of. So the operational definition of a variable, the definition of a variable in terms of the actual procedures used by the researcher to measure or manipulate it. A good operational definition defines procedures so precisely that other researchers can replicate the study. Okay, then critiquing the introduction. Is your research problem easy to identify? Is there a statement of significance of the study? Is there a good fit between the research question and how it is being investigated? Does the research question have clear objectives, questions, or hypotheses? Are key concepts identified? Are verbs used appropriately? Are hypotheses properly worded? Do they state a predicted relationship between two or more variables? Okay, so these are the questions for you to assess if you have written an adequate introduction of the study. Right, these are my references. So I'll see you in the synthesis and Q&A. Thank you very much for your attention.